Shall we start? Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Routes to Action, a Scottish Vision for Agroecology webinar hosted by the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission's Scotland Inquiry. My name is Matt Roberts, and along with Lorna Dawson, who is also on your screen somewhere, I'm the co-chair of the Scotland Inquiry, and we're delighted to have well over 100 people register for this seminar. My job at the moment is to say welcome and take you through the housekeeping for the next hour or so. We have a stellar, we are going to be recording this session, just so that everybody is aware of that. And we have a stellar lineup of speakers who've all been given a 10-minute slot to speak on their particular subject. And after each speaker, we will have a 5-minute Q&A session. So if you could all use the chat function, which I think hopefully we're all pretty familiar with by now, on your screen to ask your questions. And at the end of our amazing lineup of speakers, we will be having a plenary session, which I'll be chairing. So welcome. Thank you for that. If you can all be on mute so that we're not speaking over each other, that would be really helpful. And I'm going to hand over to Lorna now for her introduction and the first presentation. Over to you, Lorna. Thank you.
Me. Okay, thank you, Matt. Sorry. Welcome everyone to today, and I think we're now going to go on to get your initial thoughts by going to the website which is Mentimeter or Metra, whichever country you come from, and if you could go to www, there's a slide up now, with menti.com. And the code you need to enter is at the top of the screen here, 88924853. And into that, if you could immediately give your response as to what you think brings to mind when you hear the word agroecology. You can enter 3 times. So you've got 3 options of what springs to mind immediately when you hear the word agroecology. We're doing this at the very beginning because we want to get your opinion before you've heard any of the speakers or any of the evidence we're hearing today. The code is 88924853. Harry, did you manage to get that code okay? A couple of minutes we'll leave, but hopefully now we've got the emerging word cloud, and we will record this and we will come back to it later in the discussion session. So thank you, everyone. We will come back to this, but I think it's important. There's never been a more important time to consider these solutions. It's one of the important tools of the solutions of the many ways that we can deal with the external pressures that we are upon us: the COVID, climate change, biodiversity loss, trade, unemployment, and economic uncertainty. So it's a wonderful lineup we've got today. Between them, they span over 100 years experience. That's between them, not any one individual. Between them in research, practice, agronomy, soil science, strategy, farming, policy, and also engagement with the community and the general public. So we've got a lot of wonderful information to be imparted to you. Now, first speaker today, we are delighted to welcome Jim Booth, a well-kent face to us, many of us. He's head of the co-op development at Scottish Agricultural Organisation Society, SAOS to most of us, and he has been there for over 15 years. SAOS is a development organisation established over 110 years ago. Scotland's experts on farm and rural cooperation and supply chain collaboration. SAOS is a co-op itself, owned by 60 farm and rural co-ops who've combined turnover of over 1.4 billion and over 26,000 members. Fantastic reach. And Jim leads the co-op team and co-op development activities. It means leading the delivery of a range of services and training to co-ops and farmer groups, including feasibility studies, business plans, strategy reviews and workshops, risk management systems, director and staff training, and change management. And I'd also like to thank Jim, along with colleagues at SOS and Soil Social Scotland and FFCC, for working with Safari Gateway in a fellowship that's currently ongoing, Ali Carley and Las Maria Mia. So we're only at the point of this. We know there's more information we've got to obtain, but with further ado, over to Jim.
Okay, thank you, Lorna, for that warm introduction. When you were talking about over 100 years experience, I felt your focus was on me there. So, but thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm delighted to be with you today. So I know we've got limited time, so let's get started. Since the focus of the webinar is on agroecology principles, I thought I wanted to start by reviewing what that actually involves, because it means different things to different people, and that flexibility is clearly an advantage, but also it has weaknesses as well. So my take on what agroecology principles is all about is really it's about sustainability in its broadest sense. You know, that three elements of environmental, economic, and community sustainability, but also with that political dimension as well. So while agroecology principles provides a general framework, the important thing is that they're locally applied. So it's generating a diversity of practices to suit local Scottish conditions. To many people, the focus is on the environmental sustainability and protecting biodiversity. I just want to make the plea that first and foremost is economic sustainability. Because without a vibrant farming community, one that is sustainably profitable, nothing happens. That's really, really important to stress that. It's also worth stating as well that farmers don't really use or understand the term agroecology principles. So that's an issue as well we need to think about. That said, you know, more and more farmers are actually increasingly practicing agroecology principles. There's been a renewed interest in good farming practice, regenerative farming, organic farming. There's more interest in soil health, and a return to mixed farming, cover crops, etc. as well. So that's a really positive thing we can build on. The final thing I was going to say before we move on is why the need for agroecology principles. And Lorna sort of alluded to that in her introduction. But what we could say is the current food system in the UK is broken. You know, it's failing on many levels. We've seen a rise in people using food banks, yet food is incredibly cheap. You know, it's less than 9% of a household's disposable income. There's been a rise in obesity and the associated health problems with that. We all know about the loss in biodiversity and wildlife numbers declining. There's food security concerns in terms of UK, because we import more than half of our food. Farm income, something that's very close to my heart, is reliant on support as well. You know, without support, if the majority of farms, Scottish farms, wouldn't be profitable. We have an abuse of power within our supply chains, particularly from the multiple retailers. And then we have fragile rural economies, communities that are excluded from services, things such as broadband, public transport, housing as well. On top of that, we've got a third of the food globally, which is lost or goes to waste. So we've got all these challenges. Number one, clearly, is climate emergency, which is the number one for agriculture and us all. So the point is, we need new thinking. The time is right. You know, the post-global pandemic situation is a great opportunity to reset our economy and society, tackling the inequality, building a fairer, more just society. So agroecology principles presents a real opportunity. What I want to go on to now is look at the co-op model and why it works, because the benefits of cooperation is well evidenced. And cooperation is all about people, compared to an investor-owned company, which is all about capital. It's co-ops, it's all about people coming together to achieve something that they couldn't do individually. Co-op members are both the users of the service and the owners of the business. And that makes them unique. And co-ops are values-based businesses. So it's values of self-responsibility, democracy, transparency, equality, solidarity is really, really important. And trust is the key word. And it's our values, the co-op values are applied through our 7 principles, the 7 principles of cooperation. And we talk about the co-op advantage, and that's coming from economies of scale, where we're pooling resources, and it's a route to manage risk and build resilience for and protect family farms. One of the key issues for farms is fragmentation. They're just micro businesses, really, really small in the market, and these supply chains, which are getting increasingly consolidated, where there's this abuse of power, and farmers being at the bottom of the supply chain are very, very weak and just price takers, basically just price takers. Another thing about how co-ops work is about their education role. So education, effective knowledge transfer is a big part of co-ops. And again, that's one of our principles, principles 5 about education. Co-ops work as well because of their strong governance. The local ownership by members, we have democracy, 1 member, 1 vote, irrespective of the size of the business, and your members' rights are actually protected by law. Finally, co-ops provide really important in terms of rural employment. The rural facilities are really important. Profits are retained in the community rather than leaking away to pay external investors. So the key thing here in a nutshell is co-ops make things happen. They're a really important rural development tool. Now, fortunately, we in a good place in Scotland, and we talk about co-ops. Oh, sorry, it's jumped there. We talk about co-ops being the engine room of Scottish agriculture. We have a vibrant co-op sector. Sorry about that, folks, it keeps jumping. We have a vibrant co-op sector, and we've got co-ops active across all the sectors in terms of beef, dairy, pigs, lamb, grain, potatoes, veg and fruit, soft fruit, timber, aquaculture, machineries and inputs. And as Lorna said, we have a big constituency. The combined turnover of all those co-ops in Scotland, farm co-ops and rural co-ops, is over 1.5 billion and 25,000 members. So that's really, really important. And so in terms of agroecology principles, we see co-ops as the enablers. They make things happen, and they're a great route down to their family farm members. What I wanted to show here is an example of a co-op. And I wanted to showcase really our latest thinking in creating a new co-op, something that's farmer-owned, to address the market failure in terms of rural connectivity, and also to capture the opportunities that come from data and the intelligence derived from data. So this is Smart Rural. You might have heard of Smart Rural before. It's something we're creating within SAOS for the industry to own. It's going to be a co-op. And the vision really of Smart Rural is to enable rural communities and farm businesses to fully engage in and fully benefit from all the digital innovations that are coming down the line. And that's really important. So what we see is market failure in terms of broadband provision for rural communities and farms. And it effectively means that we're excluded from the world in terms of conducting business, in terms of accessing education, in terms of social networking or in entertainment as well. So we're at that disadvantaged. And that's one of the things that Smart Rural want to address, is actually to reach all these hard to reach areas and to provide rural broadbands for everyone, to make it inclusive. But Smart Rural is also about LoRaWAN infrastructure, rolling that out across the whole country. LoRaWAN, for those who've never heard of LoRaWAN, it stands for Long Range Wide Area Networks, and it's a use of radio signals to allow deployment of smart sensor farming. So it's all about technology, using technology to help farmers to make their lives easier, to reduce hassle, save time, reduce waste, improve efficiency and profitability. And that's a great route as well to tackle the climate emergency. And there's just numerous numbers of use cases and low-cost smart sensors that are available. And this is moving towards the Internet of Things as well. That said, about these advantages, the big prize, and it's really important, the big prize is the value of the big data that is generated from all the sensors that are installed throughout the country. And the important thing that these are farmer owned, rather than the tech companies or some communication companies. They belong to the farmers who generated data, and they can use that data to derive intelligence. And there's tremendous value in that in terms of predicting future events. So you can imagine weather data, soil temperature data, all that sort of thing has been used in terms of disease prevention in both of livestock and crops. And that's to improve health in terms of livestock and crops, to reduce the inputs as well, to improve productivity. So Smart Rural, it's just an exciting example that will help, in terms of a co-op that will help transform agriculture, but it aligns well with the agroecology principles. In summary, when you think about Smart Rural and that wee case study there, it's about going back to the co-op values and principles. It's about the self-help, responding to market failure. It's about people working together. It's about taking action ourselves. It's about leadership, that local ownership, and it's about equity and fairness. So finally, in conclusion, I just wanted to summarize really with some of the key points. Working together, cooperation is the only way to tackle the challenges facing the industry. The challenge is really too big for anyone to do it alone. The vision is a transition to a sustainable, fairer food system, because the current food system in the UK is broken. So there's time for new thinking. Agroecology principles and cooperation are well aligned and complementary. I see cooperation as the enabler to push agroecology practices down to the family farmers' members. And the involvement of farmers is key. There must be local ownership, adapted to the local conditions, and that's best achieved through the co-ops. And because co-ops provide the leadership, the professional management, the capital, the member engagement to make things happen. So the timing is right for change. And finally, how do you do all this? How do you implement all this? Well, to make things happen, it needs two things. It needs a leadership, that local champions, but it also needs a sympathetic government policy. And that's really important to fast track the change that's required. So thank you for your time. And Lorna, I'll hand back to you and stop sharing. Oh, it's done automatically.
Thank you very much, Jim. That was a lovely talk. Thank you. Very well presented and great information there for everyone. We've had a couple of questions in. One that I would frame in the importance of sharing knowledge, knowledge exchange and leadership and linking to government. The situation in Scotland with farm cooperatives is different to the rest of the United Kingdom and also different to Europe. Can you just explain how that is, the current situation, and how we could improve on that?
Well, the ironic thing, very, very briefly, the ironic thing is the modern co-op movement It's actually started in the UK with the Rochdale pioneers in 1842. And it's just been adopted throughout the world. And something like 1 billion people in the world depend on their livelihood through co-ops. So co-ops is massive throughout the world. The ironic thing is in the UK, we're lagging behind the rest of the world. So our participation rates is lower than elsewhere. And the reason for that is very simple, is because of our agricultural policy post Second World War. We had statutory marketing boards, so the need for cooperation wasn't there until latterly they were dissolved. So that's why we're behind. But within the UK, Scotland, we've always had SOS. SOS has been in existence, so we've always had this co-op development organisation. That's been in existence for over 110 years. So we're very fortunate. Our participation rates in cooperation is much higher. We're probably about 30% in Scotland, but we have a room to improve. If you look at the continent, for example, it would be something like 60, 70%. It would be very common.
Thank you, Jim. We've just had a comment in the chat saying that they've cooperatives as the mainstay of farming in Kenya. They couldn't survive without them. So yeah, it is a very much international.
And it is, and you see it in developing countries right through to the most market economy. In America, 1/3 of Americans are a member of a co-op. The most market-driven, free market economy in the world, but yet it's just massive in America, and it's #1 in terms of utilities, finance, then co-ops. All rural America depends on co-ops. If there wasn't no co-ops, rural America would be totally different.
We've also had a question from Adam Callow. Forgive me if I've not presented that correctly. He says, it seems the research institutes here in Scotland are slow to recognise the legitimacy of agroecology in Scotland. What is Jim's perspective on this? If you'll allow me, Jim, I'll maybe answer that first and then get you to follow it up with what your thoughts on potentially expanding that evidence base in Scotland. But I would actually say that there's a great amount of work going on in the Safari Institutes, disease prevention at Morden, work on obesity and the nutrition quality of food, SRUC, fantastic amount of field plot experimentation. Christine, you're going to hear more about that later. James Hutton Institute, Integrated Pest Management, the agroecology trials we've got, BIOS in terms of data, and RBGE in terms of the diversity of plants and how that contributes to our diet. So maybe it's our fault for not communicating that, but we need to get all that information out there. There is work going on, but Jim, what's your comment on this?
Well, I take what you're saying, Lorna, and we're very grateful. We've been successful in a Safari fellowship that's researching the benefits of cooperation. But that said, I still think it's been neglected by the research community. We have people like Stevie Thompson, SRUC economist, who's very good in that, but we need to do more. We need to do more because one of the issues is there's a deficit in understanding. So, we have to do more, our co-op sector and SOS, in getting the message across to farmers. But we need help as well to provide the independent evidence about the benefits of cooperation. We are the advocates, the champions, but we need to have that independent voice as well.
More collaboration and cooperation to get the unbiased evidence base. Jim, there's one more question here from Martin Parks. In Australia, there's been terrific cooperation in sharing the experience of transition to non-till farming. Is there similar sharing in Scotland?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Martin. In Australia, for example, there's a fantastic program called Working Together, and it was a national program with the Australian government, and it's just making such a huge impact. And it would be great to see that applied here in Scotland. But the knowledge transfer in Scotland, there's lots of organisations happening in terms of monitor farms, SRUC, the FAS and everything. So there is a lot of going on in knowledge transfer, but we could do more. And I think, others will probably be speaking about it later today, but the peer-to-peer learning is just so powerful. We know from research, we know from our experience that peer-to-peer learning there's nothing more credible when a farmer is sharing his experience. So we just need to support more of those activities. So more work to be done, but there is a lot of effort and resource going into it.
Jim, you talked about agroecological principles. Farmers are carrying out a lot of these methods without actually realising that. How can we improve that then to get farmers more aware that the good practice that they're carrying out?
Well, it's a good question, Lorna, because there is this, it's about messaging, you know, and I talked about ourselves as well as the co-ops, is getting that messaging across to farmers. And I think that'll be a challenge for the agroecology principles, the term itself. And I think we have to think about the messaging and make it simpler and focus on, the focus is how does it help farmers, or how does it help the beneficiaries? That's the key thing. So how does it help them? How does it make their lives simpler? How does it reduce hassle? How does it improve their profitability, their sustainability? These are the key things. If you get those messages across, what you'll find is that, you know, in my experience, you know, farmers see themselves as custodians, stewards of the land, and they want to leave the land in a better condition, a better heart than what they've inherited for the next generation. So you'll find you have a willing audience, you'll have a willing audience, and I think there's an appetite for change with all these initiatives are going, and they realise that the farming practices are unsustainable. We see that in the East Coast, and the best arable land in the East Coast was all arable and continuous arable crops. Now people are actually introducing grass and having, you know, mixed farming because they realised that their organic matter levels were just being depleted. It wasn't sustainable.
Thank you very much, Jim. And keep the questions coming for Jim, because we'll get them in the panel session after. We now move on, that queue there, to the fantastic farming on the east coast of Scotland. Move swiftly on to another well-kent face, Andrew Moir. Andrew runs his own arable contract farming business near Lornskirk, Aberdeenshire, on the wonderful Mearns soils. Alongside this, Andrew has had many roles within the industry over the years, including chair of the Voluntary Initiative in Scotland, chair of Scotland's premier indoor winter farming event, Agri-Scot, I'm sure all of you are well aware of it, members of the HDB, Cereals and Oilseed Rate Board, and also chaired the Combinable Crop Committee for NFUS between 2011 and 2015. Andrew's just started his second term as SQC, that's Scottish Quality Cereals Chair, and is currently Vice Chair of SMRA, Scottish Machinery Ring Association. And in November 2020, Andrew was appointed and very much led the Fergus Ewing's Arable Sector Climate Group, which delivered a report which is being acted upon at the very minute. So over to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Lorna. Just to say on the cooperative thing, I mean, I'm deeply into the cooperative stuff with Jim there, and it's really valuable to have co-ops. I've got a couple of co-ops on my doorstep, which are really integral to my business. And I'm actually, SQC are actually one of the newest co-ops in the country. Just became a co-op just a few weeks ago, so I'm very, very proud to say that that's become a co-op now, which is great for membership. I'll try and share my screen if that's possible. Are we good to go, Lorna? We're okay.
Yep, good to go.
Good. That's the front screen really of the snapshot of the Arable Climate Change Group, which we report for March 2021. I took a bit of grief for that actual photograph, but the target audience, ladies and gentlemen, was farmers, not other people at all. We're trying to attract farmers to look at this document. We could have put some pictures of flower meadows, etc., which you'll see later in my presentation, but that might not have attracted the people I really want to read this document. I'll flick through. We have the membership of the people who helped us there. I've highlighted Lorna there. Lorna kept us forensically on track with stuff, which was great. But it was a farmer-led group. We've got Dr. Matthew Brander, who's a carbon expert from Edinburgh University. And of course, most people know Fiona Burnett, a plant pathologist, but the rest are working farmers, just like myself. I'm just a simple farmer, guys. That's all I am. I'm no expert, really. I just happen to get things done when I'm asked to do it. So a lot of good people there. with a lot of practical ability, including 2 horticulturalists, with horticulture guys, James Porter and Pearson White, from that side of it, because it wasn't purely just arable my remit, it was for horticulture as well, which it was abroad from my own back, which I made, but it made a heap of sense to do that. So the remit was to get practical measures out. I'm not going to read all this out, but practical measures which were workable for Scotland, to improve the efficiency, productivity, etc., and enhance environmental contribution and mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. Now, it's a fair remit, and this is something we could talk about all day without 10 minutes here. So, and I've got lots of other things that Lorna's made, well, not maybe, but my remit in this is quite a lot. So we'll try and canter through these, and we'll take questions at the end. But that was a remit to get that done, and it was reported on March 21st, just a few weeks ago. Started in November, and it consumed my life for 4 months. I can assure you, just need to ask my good lady how much she saw of me in 4 months trying to read through everything and try and make this happen. This is how I felt a little bit. I don't know how Lorna feels, but there's an awful lot of stuff out there which you follow the crowd, etc., but an awful lot of stuff that you need to read through and make some sense of in it. And I'm not saying I made sense of it all at all, but it's a lot of stuff to get into your head and trying to get through to people of what's going on. And that's how I felt with that, but it's a bit of a different one. Now this one shows you the sort of scale of the problem, if you like, and where agriculture sits in it. Crops at 21% compared to the beef guys, but I don't want to be saying MD's worse or better or whatever. We have a problem. The Scottish Government has a remit to a lawful remit to reduce the emissions, so we have a really big part to play. And I think agriculture actually has one of the most perfect ways of doing it. We are the green people here. We are the people who can actually make this happen and do make it happen. And given the right signals and the right opportunities, I think we'll see that happen quite soon. It is happening already, but not as fast as it should be. But that graph shows you the scale of where we are and what we've got to do. The climate change update, well, this is the actual figures that we have to get to, the 35% reduction, etc. COVID didn't help, obviously, but it's an economic shock, but we've got to work through that. There is a great opportunity here, ladies and gentlemen, for us to actually get there and use the strategies and to do low carbon agriculture. And hundreds of policies and proposals have actually landed on Mr. Ewing's desk, but I have to say that the farmer-led groups, this is one of the horticulture and arable one, along with hill and upland, pigs, and the beef and sheep guys, an awful lot of good stuff coming through, which government are going to look at. Regardless of all the papers that's gone before, these are the ones, because they're farmer-led, and if they're farmer-led, there's at least a good chance that we can actually ask people to do them, because they'll see that they've been formed, opinions have been formed, and things that we can do to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions can be done by working farmers like myself. So it's a fair remit, but we'll get there. I just plucked this straight out of our report, because I'm sure it will resonate with most of you around in this Zoom. It's climate smart agriculture one. It's where we need to be, and I think this is probably where we'll actually be going. It's aligning with an awful lot of other organisations, and I think climate smart agriculture is a great way for us to sell what we're trying to do in a practical way to farmers. The problem we've got is that a lot of these things are not well known within the farming circle, so we've got to get that message out there. And Jim spoke about messaging, the IFM message. But we've got ways of doing that. Linking environment and farming. LEAF, I've been a member of LEAF for over 30 years. In fact, this farm that I have responsibility for has been a leaf member and there's a leaf demonstration farm, first leaf demonstration farm in Kincardine, which is old Kincardine, which we're now in Aberdeenshire, but very proud of that. And we've been doing things for an awful long time, which are agroecological, but probably wasn't called that at the time. And we'll maybe come to that later. But the leaf thing, we're trying very hard to push that sort of initiative. It's proven. We're not reinventing the wheel. They're working in Jersey just now with the Jersey government for their support scheme. I very much think that we could do a very similar thing here in this country to move the thing forward in a sensitive way, that farmers can actually get some support to make this happen and allow us to get to the greenhouse gas emissions targets that we have to get to. But of course, getting that greenhouse gas emissions actually it's good business for farmers to do that. But probably more of that later. I'm probably rambling a wee bit now, Lorna. You'll maybe keep me at the time. Also, we've got to do all that in a backdrop to Scotland's food and drinks ambitions. And I just put this up. I took this straight off Scotland Food and Drink thing yesterday or last night, I can't remember. And if you just look there, a £30 billion opportunity. Now, that means production, ladies and gentlemen. We have to produce, and producing well and efficiently will actually reduce our per tonne carbon footprint. So just to say that we're trying to have our cake and eat it probably in this game. Now, we've come up with a suite of mitigation measures, from like 43 in the report. And if you haven't read the report, please find it. It's only a 25-page report. It'll take you 20 minutes just to read through it, but there's an awful lot of stuff in there which you will see is probably what you're looking to do, and it's something we're trying to persuade farmers is a good idea to get involved with. And we've got quite a lot of measures in there that they can and are doing, but that will be tied to a support type system, which I'm not going to get into here because that would take far too long, and it's not really the remit, but there is a lot of things there. I would like to say the two in blue there, the plant breeding and electrification, those are further down the line. They didn't really figure in the inventory stuff up to 2030. These are things we think will be mitigate greenhouse gas emissions probably post 2030 time. But I'm reading in my local press this morning, the speed of change and in technology, and that was in the oil industry, is absolutely unbelievable. So I quite believe the technology is going to, and all the institutions, the Hutton and SRUC are doing some fabulous work and getting things for us to allow us to use going forward. I mean, the legumes one there, that's a good example. I mean, it actually shows, and we'll come to that in a minute, I think it's there, yeah, legumes is one of the better to reduce emissions, a good aggregate mitigation there. But it's a lovely one to say, but as a person of a farming I've used legumes a lot in the past, it's not perfect because they tend to be very, very late in coming to a harvest. And I, for one, have been far too intimate with my combine on 2 occasions, having grown beans. And I mean by that is I had to go into the combine, physically take out all the sieves, go in with a power washer and completely power wash it out all in the month of October, which is not a very pleasant thing to do. And I'm getting too old for it now. But if we can get sort of legumes who are combinable and can be cut in September, for instance, what a difference that would make for rotation, for using less nitrogen. And I could go on and on here, but there is, of course, the other things with the intercropping and stuff, legumes, which is another thing as well, which can happen. I'll pick a couple of nitrification and urease inhibitors. These are things that we can and do use just now, but they are expensive, guys. And there is also the potential for unintended consequences with them as well. We're not sure, and there needs more research to be done, but the potential is that they might be dangerous to the actual soil itself, some of the bacteria and stuff in the soil, but there's no real proof on that yet, but it's a potential, so we have to be careful. And variable rate nitrogen, that was a lime application. Well, I've been doing variable rate on everything for 25 years now. It's not new, and it's becoming sort of normal practice for a lot of farmers to use that type of technology. But it's a great way to actually target exactly what the crops are needing. But again, I could go on forever on that one. We'll move on. That's basically what I've just said.
A couple of minutes, Andrew, to move on to
yeah,
questions.
we'll move quickly. Yep, Lorna. Yeah, lots of biodiversity measures, which we've just a few there. Which, as I say, there's heaps of. I'll not go into too many of them there. You can see them. But the barriers, I mean, it's a mindset of farmers really is a big barrier to where I am. We have to get that changed, and I'm sure there is a lot of change there. I think the Arable guys have had a mindset to move on more than possibly the stock guys, and I think that's possibly down to the way they've been supported in the past. But that's just my opinion. Lots of these measures, I'll just rush through them, Lorna. Farm Advisory Service, Jim mentioned that. Education, support for research and development, absolutely critical. Demonstration farms, monitor farms, Jim mentioned them. They're all there. The knowledge exchange, we've got to get that across to people. Improving performance, well, direct support can be a problem, I think. We've got to change, that's going to get changed. And capital grants, yeah, we can argue a lot of these things going forward. Support for exit, I'm not sure I would agree with that entirely, but getting to my age, I might. So who knows? And tax incentives, yeah, well, who knows? There's a lot of things there, financial schemes which could be used. Your own Farming for Change document. I don't see any farmer who would disagree with not using synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. But the harsh reality is, and Jim actually said it, we can't afford to do that at the moment. I think we'll move towards not using them. And if there's any farmers want to release 7.5% of their agricultural land for agroecology, I think that should be encouraged. Some will not want to do any, but some might want to do 20. And I think that would be good to give people the choice on their own land. I'll crack on, Lorna. Lots of climate change. Yeah, why don't we do it? Well, I've just alluded to reduced output, loss of flexibility, supply chain problems, risk, huge risk. We've got to overcome the barriers. We'll just have to get there. Now, this is coming to probably the better bit, point towards the end, Lorna. This is a very bad picture of winter oats sown in springtime and sown with flowers and grass just dressed on top of it, and that's what it resulted in the autumn. An oat crop with green with grasses and flowers for the birds and the bees, and it was fabulous. That's just a close-up of the flowers. And we've also just recently, this is all at home, this is my own patch. So what we've done, this is a flower meadow, which we've done quite a few, and we've done a few of these now, little flower meadows, parts of fields that are not so good, little corners, putting in flowers, grasses for the birds and everything to work with. And we've also got 7 kilometres worth of hedging and 200 acres of trees as well, by the way. Now, I shouldn't really have put that one up because I'll get slated for it, but it's true. So there we go.
Thank you
Sorry,
very
Lorna,
much.
I've taken too long.
There's so much to cover, and you've covered it brilliantly. Thank you, Andrew. There's been lots of questions. We've only got time to answer one right now, but a lot of the questions bear with us because we will be asking them in the panel session. So thank you, Andrew. One question here from Nikki Yoxhall. She says, what nature-based solutions to climate change and biodiversity loss do you think should be helpful in the arable sector in Scotland?
Nature-based. Gosh, well, we're doing all the things we're doing here, and we've got ponds, hedges, wildflower meadows, all the things I just spoke about a minute or two ago are nature-based things, which and well, the stuff that they're doing in France, putting trees around fields. I wouldn't advocate putting trees down middle of our fields, to be perfectly honest. At the moment, we've got an awful lot of woodland, but these sort of measures can and are shown to be beneficial to yields and to the wildlife and the ecology around about it.
Absolutely. You're demonstrating on your own land even there, you're adopting these nature-based solutions to these important issues.
Yes, and we've been doing it for a lot of years as well. It's not new, you know.
Absolutely. So maybe we can come back to the chat session, the panel session. It's often about definitions as well. We've had a few comments in the chat about there's confusing in wording that people use. There's so many different terms that people use and they're not clearly defined or understood. However, we'll move on to our next speaker now, and we are delighted to invite Anna Allamand, who is the Farming and Land Use Manager at the Soil Association. Anna works with farmers across Scotland to implement regenerative and low input approaches for on-farm resilience, both environmental and financial. So Anna, perhaps you can define those terms as well in the context of this agroecological event. To do so, Anna organises knowledge exchange events open to all farmers and facilitates farmer-led groups working together to find practical solutions to these current challenges. She's also involved in work on impact measuring strategies and tools to assess what is working and to develop new avenues. Before joining the Soil Association, interestingly, Anna worked in Chile, where she coordinated cherry and walnut production and commercialization teams, before moving on to facilitate investor-growers relations for farm development. Very relevant, that experience from South America, bringing it to Scotland. Anna, over to you.
Thanks, Lorna. I'm going to be sharing my screen, and my apologies immediately because I'm sure I'm going to win Queen of the Obvious with the title of my presentation, but I think it's really important to make sure that we're sort of like highlighting the very basics if we're going to start this agroecological transition. So as I mentioned, Queen of the Obvious, what do we perceive as the key for agroecological success is to engage farmers and crofters. About the Soil Association and what our 10-year transition to agroecology and sustainable diets, that's a mouthful, but that's our strategy coming in the coming next 10 years to make sure that agroecology actually starts taking strength and actually rooting itself in all of the UK, but in particular as well in Scotland. We're going to be talking about Scotland today. Why agroecology? We believe that agroecology actually provides us with the tools that we need to meet these 5 goals that we've set ourselves on the farming team. The first is to transform livestock farming to reduce the risk of pandemics and antimicrobial resistance. I think that after last year, people are going to be really on board with that one. We've also sort of like set ourselves, again, really ambitious goals to exceed Europe's ambition to have pesticide use and grow organic farming to 25% farmland by 2030. We would love to instigate a farmer-led tree planting revolution, and really importantly for us, to drive farmer-led innovation and professional development that moves away from this agrochemical model that we have nowadays and sort of like takes agroecological R&D and knowledge sharing more into its own. And finally, it's a Soil Association. Of course, it needs to be soil as well, to turn the soil from carbon source into carbon sink. We have those 5 goals. They look lovely. They look great on the paper, but how do they actually happen? And this is where it's really important for us to understand that our role is actually to support. Sorry, I have no idea what happened there. Who are the farmers, the crofters, and the land managers. And to do that, we've actually developed a series of projects, and we're going to be developing, oh, it's not working, sorry. There we go. Our programs have focused on how to actually share knowledge and also create knowledge amongst farmers and engage with them to find ways to actually bring this agroecological practices to the farms in ways that are practical. I'm going to be talking about Farming for the Future, which is our last program. It just finished in March and it went for about 2.5 years. And it was really, really successful in engaging with farmers on different levels. And we think that having a variety of outlets, of ways of models of engaging with farmers is going to be critical to actually customize and be able to reach as many audiences as we need to. Really importantly, the key objectives for farming for the future, excuse me, were to build strong knowledge and skills based for productive, profitable and sustainable agriculture. Now, really importantly, we do focus an awful lot on the fact that it has to be productive and profitable, because as everybody's saying, it's lovely to talk about a future where farm is quite idyllic, back to nature, really lovely. But if it's not allowing farmers to actually have a life for themselves, if it's not allowing people to actually get the food that they need, it kind of defeats the purpose. So focusing on productive and profitable was really important, as well as on the sustainable side of things. And making sure that not only the environmental performance of Scottish agriculture, but also the economic performance was improved through very practical actions was really key as well for this program. We focus on 5 main areas, which actually relate an awful lot to this goals that we set ourselves for the 10-year strategy. So soil management, crop and grassland management, animal health, woodland creation, and organic farming. And what really works, it really worked on many, many levels, but I would like to share with you briefly 2 of the models that we used, and a little bit more in detail, the 3rd model that we used, which was really effective in engaging farmers and therefore making sure that this impact that we wish actually started to take place and was actually happening on the ground. So the first model, it's an sort of like entry-level model, if you want. One of the problems that we see often is that either people are coming into really sort of like complex talks, if you want to, or to basic talks. And it's a little bit like Lorna was saying, sometimes we get caught in this echo chamber where we assume that people know enough law and that they should already be on the way in the process and everything. The truth is, if we want to actually make change, we're going to need to start engaging with people that haven't necessarily been exposed to these agroecological ideas before. And that have been in farming for an awful long time, because the model has not been agroecological. And there's no point pretending that everybody should know. We need to actually provide the tools for people to start learning. So our first point of contact is always face-to-face, and then after COVID, webinars, where we would just start engaging and give interested people this first flavor of what agroecological practices are. Crucially, we made sure that it was very practical. So as you can see there, we usually invite a farmer that has actually used some of these tools and shares how their experience has been. That worked really well. At first, it was great as well for creating little networks when it was face-to-face, because it was people just coming together to discuss a topic that they're interested in, which naturally leads to really good relations. And then after COVID hit, we were forced to move into the virtual world, which kind of made us lose that really strong network creation, but allowed us to reach audiences well beyond what we were doing before. So this model, really interesting, very recommendable, but definitely not the one that we need to engage with if we want to see that kind of change we were talking about in a short space of time, 10 years. A second aspect that we've been sort of like looking into, and here our comms team shout out, they did an amazing job, was bringing those people that were interested in a first approach more information by having a resource center where they could find more information. So on our website, we made sure to keep updating, and there's a lot of information there that farmers can reach. But probably the most successful in terms of real impact in real life has been labs. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the mob grazing group, mostly what we learned through them, which was because the mob grazing group eventually turned into an operational group. So there's an awful lot that we learned through their experience. I saw that Nikki and Doug, who are part of this group, were here. So thank you so much for having participated. It's been great to see how it's evolved and how it's changed. So you can see here, the field labs, I assume that everybody knows what it is. And again, that's the kind of problem that we keep on having. We just assume that people know things. A field lab is a group of farmers coming together, interested in one particular topic they want to develop further, and to make sure that they can actually meet, sort of like gather knowledge in the long run, and not have to, on top of that, put all the administration that comes with having a group like this. The Soil Association brought in a facilitator. Now you can see Clem there in her lovely turquoise the sweater, she is one of the best facilitators for one of the best groups. It was absolutely fantastic what happened there. She basically brought the consistency. She organized all the admin. Here's why we're meeting. Here's how we're doing it. Bringing in the people that had the knowledge that the farmers themselves were expressing they wanted. So the key to all this process is someone to support farmers who have very clear ideas of what knowledge they want, or helping them find exactly what they want and then move the process forward. This model was really interesting. It generated a lot of impact within the group, no doubt about it, but it also sort of like spread outside, because as the group gained more and more confidence, they were able to sort of like start talking about it. Now, these guys are also sort of like absolute stars in themselves. They're fantastic farmers. So it's actually brought an awful lot of gravitas to what they were saying. So I would like to share a couple of the lessons that we learned through this field lab work, which we think would be really important and could be impactful, not only for us, but for the rest of the community if we want to engage farmers and make sure that all this uptake of agroecological ideas are actually taking place. First, 3 ideas that are really relevant about making it personal. Remember, these are people that have lives other than what we want them to do. And we need to make sure that we react to them, to what they need and to what they think. If we come as owners of the truth to tell people what they need to do, we're missing on a lot of information, but we're also being really, I would say we're missing the humbleness that is needed to actually engage with people. So making sure that we understand where they're coming from and giving spaces for them to come together is a fantastic way to learn more about the barriers to the drivers and how to make it so that these ideas that we're bringing actually resonate with them. And our experience and the experience of this field lab, by bringing all these amazing people together to discuss these ideas, the solutions that came out were way bigger and the outcomes were way more complex and interesting than they would have been if we'd focused on one person or if we brought our knowledge to everyone. Then the second thing, and really important, is that there's a huge farmer appetite to co-create knowledge. And there's a wealth of knowledge, centuries, generations of knowledge there that we should actually be leveraging. And so it's really important, especially for large scale or long-term system, I don't know, here we say agroforestry, for example. Farmers working together are a force to be reckoned with. And the knowledge that they can create is something that we should sort of like humbly be able to help gather, but we're not we need to take a second seat here, sort of like allow them to take control of the process. And regional approaches are really important as well. It's easy to think, especially because agroecology is something that we're looking forward to implementing in lots of places. It's easy to forget the importance of regional conditions, regional tastes. All these things play really importantly in how we engage and how we bring this change into the ground. So it's really important that we keep that in mind and we understand the local context before coming with cookie cutter solutions. And make it practical. That's the second aspect that for us was critical. First, the role of facilitation. We need to understand that farmers and crofters, of course, have a life. They are doing a million things. These are super busy people. We need to help them if we want to gather all this knowledge and we want to engage with them. So the role of the facilitator is absolutely crucial, and facilitators like Clem Sanderson, for example, is absolutely essential. Second aspect, it's lovely to talk an awful lot, but keep in mind indicators and monitoring protocols. That's really important. You want to drive change, make it sort of like practical so that you see how change evolves through the times and how you can actually, by seeing change, it actually makes you want to engage more, and it also brings other people along. And increase the recognition of farmers. I think it's really important that we actually start giving farmers the really central role that they deserve. They've been hammered by lots of people lately, arguing that they're, I don't know, pretty much poisoning some areas or they're behind this agricultural catastrophe. It's not true. As they were saying, Andrew's saying, they're the ones that get things done. as Jim was saying, they're stewards of their land, responsible people, amazing people, full of ideas, and they know their land better than anyone. We need to give them the central role that they deserve. I'm already closing, but I think that it's really relevant. If we want to make change in the ground, and if we want to drive knowledge sharing and create more skills, farmers and crofters need to have a central place. They're going to be critical, and we need to support them as soon as possible so that they can actually start ensuring this long-term change. And we need to understand their circumstances and understand that they're making a living out of it. It's not enough to ask them to take responsibility for things. If we're going to ask them to take on this mega responsibility, we need to at least make sure that they have the tools to actually make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was just brilliant. And you have just followed on really nicely from Jim and Andrew, showing the importance of giving farmers a voice. It's working with the farmers. And you talked about the peer-to-peer learning and your mob grazing work. Fantastic to involve, co-construct the solutions. Farmers definitely at the very heart of it. We've got a question from Celine Delabre. She says, should field labs be part of what FAS one-to-many offer?
I think field labs should be part of everyone's toolkit. They're just absolutely fantastic, but they do require a lot of engaging, and they require as well, sometimes it's easy to forget how relevant having a great facilitator is for this to work. Having someone like, again, I'm going to keep on going back to Clem just because it's been quite, it's really empowering and really sort of like uplifting to see someone that has managed to drive this without being the forefront, if that makes sense. She's not taking protagonism. She's allowed everyone else to actually be themselves and do it. But having someone that can drive that process, it's way harder to find than you think it might be. So although I think it's a great resource, I think it's a resource that needs to be addressed responsibly. It's not something that you can just go and put a couple people together, someone that puts dates on the agenda and that's it.
That's super, Anna. Thank you. We'll now move on. There'll be more questions again for Anna. Keep them coming. There's a lot of interesting discussion going on in the chat. Please feel free to contribute there. We will be recording all of that and that will be circulated later. But I'd like to now move on. Again, a fantastic evidence-based scientist, but also one who works with farmers. Works very much at the heart. She's a professor. It's Christine Watson of Agricultural Systems at SRUC. Very much a background in soil science and a very long interest in changing agricultural systems for the better, managing nutrients and carbon, being more effective and efficient. She also holds a guest professorship at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, again showing that we can transfer that knowledge that's built up in different countries, bring it back for the benefit of the Scottish farmers and Scottish people. Over to you, Christine.
Thanks very much, Lorna. And it's great to be here to talk to you about agroecology. And I'm going to talk about the importance of diversifying food and farming systems and give you some examples from research, both in the UK and in Sweden. And I just wanted to start with this nice picture of the landscape in Aberdeenshire showing the trials on organic crop rotations that have been there for around 30 years now. So we have a strong background in this area. So where can we use agroecological principles to diversify food and farming systems in order to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, actually, you look at pretty much any aspect of farming, the field level, the farm level, or going up in terms of the landscape and the region. Pick pretty much any part of the system and you can think about diversifying it. You can drive it from dietary diversification down through the supply chain down to farming, or you can drive it upwards from farming towards dietary diversification. I think one of the things that's really interesting me at the moment is how we use crop diversity to drive change. If we diversify what we're putting into the ground, that diversifies the organic matter inputs to soil, which builds healthy soils, but also there's a lot of different things we can do in terms of managing crop residues or agricultural residues in general as we go up into the supply chain. Are we making the best use of the kind of co-products of manufacturing? How can we use those to make our systems more efficient in terms of managing carbon and cutting emissions? I'm going to go on and show you some examples. I'm going to talk mainly about the field and the rotational level. And there's my little string bean at the bottom. He's sort of, well, he or she, in fact, is scratching their head and thinking, well, this is all a bit complicated. What can I do here? So I'm going to look at temporal diversity in terms of rotation design, a little bit about managing spatial diversity, and then the potential for bringing more perennials into the farming system. So if we think first just about diversifying crop rotations, there's a number of big studies being done on the impact of just using a cover crop in terms of what that can do for soil carbon. And really very simply, this is a worldwide meta-analysis, but if you take a monoculture, so growing continuous cereals, and add in one different crop, you make an impact on soil carbon, 3.5%. Adding a cover crop into a rotation of cereals, an increase of 8.5% of soil carbon. These are simple things to do. These aren't complicated things to do. And Chris Paplow did an analysis of Swedish long-term experiments that have been in the ground for up to 24 years. And every year that you add a ryegrass cover crop in, you put in 1/3 of a ton of carbon. Now, ryegrass might not be a cover crop of choice, but that's just one example of what diversification can do. If we think about in-field diversity, and we heard a little bit earlier about some of the difficulties of growing legumes and the options for intercropping. I want to talk just briefly about a European project called Remix we've been involved in. And you can see here 2 examples of intercropping. I know we're not quite ready for chickpeas in Scotland. This is chickpeas in northern Spain. But the point of this is that you can see that the chickpeas are using the space near the ground on a sort of horizontal plane, and then you've got wheat, which is using the space up above the chickpeas. And in the other picture, which I think is peas and triticale, you see that they're behaving in a very different way, and they've each got a sort of space in the kind of vertical dimension. So by putting the crops with different growth habits together, you're able to make a better use of a whole lot of resources around sunlight and space and nutrition. One of the complexities of having an intercrop like that is that when you harvest it, you get a mixed set of grains, and that produces its own challenges. We tend to grow intercrops as mixtures in the field, but here in China, you can see they're very adapted. They grow, this is from China Agricultural University from a colleague, they grow strip intercrops, and they have little combines which zoom up and down the different crops and cut them. So what do we do when we get this mixture? Well, again, within the Remix trial, we've been working on the Remix project, we've been working on the technology of this. Colleagues in INRA and a Danish machinery company, Agco, and they started just looking at how you could alter the settings on a combine to increase the value of the product. And this is mostly about the fact that you can damage the grains less if you have the right harvest setting. And this is the gross product in terms of euros per ton of material harvested. But you can see that for each of the crop combinations, wheat, lentil, rapeseed, pea, barley pea, and wheat and lupin, by changing the harvest setting, you could increase the gross product. So again, it's not rocket science, but it's ways that we need to adapt the whole system to be able to make the most of these kind of agroecological principles and getting the benefits of crop mixtures. Carrying on the theme of intercropping of cereals and grain legumes, this is work that we've done under the Scottish Government RESUS, the SRP, looking at different mixtures of cereals and grain legumes. And again, to just give you one example, it's not all about yield, but what kind of quality improvements can we see through growing things in intercrops? And if you just look at this top left box, this is the protein content of the grain legume when they're grown with and without cereals. And you see beans and beans grown with barley, you don't see anything very different, as you might not expect to. But if you look at this table here, then this is what actually happens to the protein content of the cereal. So barley grown alone, protein content of 8.9%. Barley grown with beans, the barley has a protein content of 13.5%. Lupins grown with barley, 10.9, peas with barley, 11.3. So, you know, quite a clear benefit. It varies year to year. The differences weren't quite as big in 2017, but you're still seeing this benefit to the cereal crop of being grown in a mixture with the grain legume. Massive potential for introducing perennials into cropping systems. Again, you know, a variety of examples here, but this is a silvo arable system taken after harvest. Doesn't look particularly pretty, but it's cereals grown in between rows of very high value trees. So this is actually sea buckthorn. So, you know, great value coming from that crop alone. More traditional agroforestry with sheep and cereals, and there's a nice picture of the agroforestry at Glensock. I think also thinking about alternatives. So perennial wheat, for example, this has been grown in Sweden, and you look at the root to shoot ratio of perennial wheat, intermediate wheatgrass, 2.6 root to shoot ratio compared with 0.3 in a spring wheat. It doesn't have a great yield to it, but actually if you can use that as a buffer strip or a non-productive area, perhaps using the cereal for forage, what are the kind of value we can bring by thinking about diversification into more perennial crops? Oh, the last couple of examples I want to give you are about the sort of more integration of crop livestock systems, and in a project, a new EU project called Mixed, we are looking at sheep grazing winter cereals. Not a new practice, but there are many farmers using it, but what we lack is any sort of guidelines or scientific information about how heavily you can graze the winter cereal. What are the best varieties? Are there varieties which are particularly suitable to being grazed and then giving grain the following year? And you know, what does that do on soils? So this is March of this year, and this is about 3 weeks later, and you can see in the trial beds differences of as to how hard that cereal has been grazed. And watch this space, we'll be telling you next year what happened next. We're also working with SAOS within that project, and they've got a very nice study about east-west livestock movement, where there are cattle being moved from upland into lowland systems, and looking at the potential benefit of bringing those cattle into arable systems to build soil organic matter. Lots of challenges there, social challenges in the partnership between farmers, challenges around animal health and welfare, challenges around skills, around infrastructure. If you move cattle into an area which is predominantly arable, you need fences, you need water. But actually what we're looking at there with the group in SAOS is how these things work and what the barriers are. So finally, to sort of leave you some thoughts about the future, I didn't do this in cahoots with Jim or any of the others, but you'll see a number of similarities in here around the opportunities for agroecology, about the importance of a greater integration of science and practice to make change happen more effectively, the importance of collaboration and cooperative approaches at different scales. We need to look at the incorporation of technology, the drones, the sensors we heard about earlier, but also things about how can we adapt things like combines for dealing better with intercrops. What we're doing when we're thinking about resilience is building our soils and our farming systems so they can deal with what climate change is going to throw at the future. And agroecology has a lot to offer there, regardless of how you think about this, whether you think at the field scale, the landscape scale, or as I started off with that whole supply chain approach. One size simply doesn't fit all. We need a lot of approaches. We need all the brains around this video conference to make to increase our ability to adapt and to apply agroecological approaches going forward. I think that's all I'm going to say, Lorna. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christine. As we expected, fantastic run through of the vast experience of your research, showing resilience. And and actually the last point there that you went on, the One Health principle of the health of our people, the health of our animals, and the health of our environment, they're all so closely linked together. And it was nice to see you going back to the root system, the root space, because I know you didn't have the time to go into it, but the benefit of that root exudation, exploiting different diverse zones in the soil, decomposition, and coming back to carbon sequestration that allows us to do. So that leads on to a question by Celine Delabra. She's asked, are beans and oats competing for the same vertical space? And I think I'd include above and below ground in that. And I'd also add in, could you also add your thoughts on the role of legumes in that? Thank you, Christine.
So if you're intercropping a non-legume and a legume, effectively the legume is able to fix its own nitrogen, so it doesn't compete for the soil nitrogen. So the oats or the cereal can use the soil nitrogen. So if you like, you get a kind of sparing effect. You certainly do see differences in both above and below ground architecture of plants. Beans do a lot of their rooting at quite shallow depths. They're quite good at picking up phosphorus in the top layers of the soil. Oats are brilliant scavengers. They'll get all over the soil profile. They love acidic conditions. They'll put up with pretty much anything. Great Scottish crop. Above ground, it's important to think that the two crops develop at different times. So you've got, they're often occupying a different space, and you might want to pick particular varieties. So the leafless peas are good in an intercrop situation. You pick your variety to suit what you want, and the timing that those will develop, both, you know, which crop develops first, and do they have different times for having the greatest need for resources.
Thank you, Christine. Diversity of timing as well is so important. We've got time for one last question, but keep the questions coming. We've got a lot coming up for the panel session. Christine, the questions come in that greater integration of science and practice is needed. Where would you integrate agroecology in policy?
That's an interesting question. Where? In my mind, agroecology can fit into so many different places. I mean, obviously, it's important in terms of land use policy. And I think one of the things that we need to think about going forward in policy is, do we need regionally adapted policy? Are there areas where different crops are particularly suited, different approaches are particularly suited? So I think, you know, putting it into land use policy in a way which allows us to diversify our systems, but to make the best use of the resources in the place we're talking about, whether that's soil resources or the climate. Don't know if that answers the question.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, no, and I think we know, and you touched upon it there, the integration of policy, that the Scottish Land Use Strategy number 3 came out recently, and the Scottish Land Commission with their regional land use pilots. That could be an opportunity to work in regional place-based solutions. So anyway, just throwing that up for discussion. But I think we'll move on now to Will. So Will Fraser, he works directly for Food Farming and Countryside Commission. He is a senior researcher and policy development officer. And he also, and importantly, just as important, he also helps run the family farm in Northern Ireland. So it'd be lovely to hear some aspects of that as well from Will. But today he's joining us to discuss a report which was recently launched by Food Farming Countryside Commission called Farming Smarter, investing in our future, all of our futures. And this urges the government to establish an agroecology development bank. But I'll hand you over to Will, who will be much more eloquent in discussing that with us today. Thank you, Will.
Hi, Lorna. Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'll try and be mega quick and scoot through this so we can get some time for the panel session. But yeah, I just wanted to say first that I'm starting off a farming journey here in Northern Ireland, and actually a good chunk of the learning at the moment we've been taking from practitioners in Scotland. So we're learning a lot from you and following a lot of your certainly the future Farming for the Future webinars and stuff have been brilliant for us over here in terms of getting some confidence in trying to do things differently. So brilliant stuff. Anyway, just a quick scoop through some of the work we've been putting together at the Commission over the last 6 months. At the start of the year, we published our Farming for Change report, which is really trying to answer the question that's sort of perhaps been dogging agroecology and these sort of approaches for many years, is that can you feed a country through this type of system? And we wanted to explore whether that was actually possible in the UK, and the answer we found was a resounding yes, if you're willing to engage in all aspects of the food chain. I think to pick up on Christine's points of work and agroecology be applied in the chain, it is everywhere, and if you're willing to engage in those principles at every level and every aspect, then and make them work in sync with each other, then we can achieve some quite substantial transformations to the way we farm. And I think particularly, it was underpinned by a model from IDRI, which showed, we're able to look at different changes in different parts of the UK, and particularly in Scotland, it was looking at perhaps a substantial role for, I guess, sort of specialist, extensive, high nature value ruminant livestock farming is something perhaps that it could be really built on, but also basically increase in cropping across cereals, protein crops, legumes, as we've been talking about across the board. But I guess a big question for me, and perhaps something for discussion on the panel, is the role of horticultural crops within an agroecological system and within Scotland, because that is a big area for increase if we're going to think about the dietary aspects and the health aspects of our food system as well. So that was a couple of the points. I think, to pick up on some of Andrew's point, one of the things that you said right at the start on your slide is that you can either, I'll have to look what I wrote down. You can go for the simple solution and it's wrong, or you can go for the complex but it's right. And that's something we've been learning across this whole space of agroecology, that it's very, very knowledge intensive, and there's a huge room for experimentation. I think that's partly why we're, certainly through these workshops, getting a huge amount of interest. People are suddenly thinking we can do things different, we can test different approaches and techniques and actually get stuff which is tailored directly for our farm business, our context, our climate, our soils, and that's quite liberating and enlightening. It's certainly what we're finding. Anyway, just to cut to the second part of the sort of research we've been putting together. So we reckon we can feed a country through an agroecological food system, but we're going to need to be investing in that. And I think that's key. We always get hung up on subsidy and the need to subsidize agriculture. I guess the case we're trying to put forward is that we need to be investing in it. And that's where our two Farming for Change or Farming Smarter papers have aligned their sort of logic, is that agroecology is good business. That's what we believe, whether that's through layering of enterprises or synergies within your farm, or through the ability to cut out input costs and focus on profitability over yield, or to look at more local and diversified routes to market, and many other ways in which agroecological enterprises are flourishing kind of despite that system. But there are also challenges. We feel like if you're a small farm, if you're tenanted, if you're trying to practice new techniques, if you're a new entrant, then it is actually really hard to make that transition. So this all lines up to say that we do need a mission-led, state-led development institute to help finance and align finance into agroecological farming practices. And going back to the horticultural point, we're particularly, that is going to require some capital, particularly when we talk about water infrastructure, on-farm water infrastructure, and how do we manage some of our differing growing seasons across the UK. That's all going to require investment. So that's the case we're making. Since we launched it back in March, we've had substantial interest from people in this space. So it's not, we thought it was a bit of a weird and wonderful idea, but actually it does seem to be landing in lots of different places. So keen to push on with it. I just wanted to quickly finish with a couple of things we've heard from other workshops, and it's really just echoing a lot of what's been said today. And our big thing is really the focus on people, and if we're going to get this done, on collaboration and cooperation, and how do we get our cultural sort of engine room working across the UK to get working together for sharing resources, for sharing learning, and for learning from each other. And that's certainly, one of the things we've seen and learned from the workshops. There's a massively growing amount of peer-to-peer networks that are sharing huge volumes of information about farm practice on a daily basis. I've just joined the Base Island network over here, and it's madness the amount of farm practice that's shared on a daily basis in some of these networks. So long may they continue and flourish. And then really just to the point, it is backing up that agroecological practices are increasingly achievable and realistic and do make good business sense. It's stuff we've been hearing directly from other farmers. Also that adding in this diversity with a flexible, open-minded mindset, lots of businesses are actually increasing output off the same area of land. So sort of counterintuitive to perhaps conventional wisdom that it means you've got to take a hit on output. And yeah, that if you're putting diversity and making that integral to your farming business in your fields, not just around the edges, then actually there are clear and measurable production benefits to be gained almost straight away. So I will leave it there. There are a whole bunch of lessons that we're getting from this and many more today. And I'll pass back to you now, Lorna.
Thank you very much, Will. I think you've shown the importance of the underlying resources being allocated at the right time to the right people in the right way. And that's why we're having these discussion meetings as we are today. But I'll now hand over swiftly to Matt, there's lots of questions there. People are firing in. We should have had an extra half hour onto this session, but never mind. We'll have another one and you're most welcome. But Matt, over.
Thank you, Lorna. I think we may also have another Menti poll that we'd like to push out. Lucy, do you want to tell me whether or not we're still going to do that?
Yep, we will. Just you can have a couple of questions and then we'll move on to the final.
Okay, great. So if people want to hang on with us, we are a few minutes over, but we will keep going. So a question to the whole panel, please, from Denise Walton, who says, a lot of current farming machinery is designed and built around the application of glyphosate and other agrochemicals in industrial agricultural settings. Is this potentially a limiting factor in the rollout of agroecology, particularly considering the huge capital cost involved? And if we go around the panel in the order you spoke, if that's okay, so starting off with Jim, bearing in mind, if we can keep this to a minute, Jim, that'd be great. Your answer. The
answer is no, because machinery can be pooled, machinery can be shared. So we need to go back to informal cooperation and machinery. So pooling of machineries. It's as simple as that.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Andrew?
As a former chairman of Ringlink Scotland, which has got 3,300 members, yeah, pooling of machinery is the way forward. I do it all the time.
Brilliant, thank you. Anna?
This is probably going to be more around sort of like my previous experience as a farmer, but yeah, sharing machinery seems to be a fantastic way to actually not have to increase your capital costs and also get to know your neighbors. So,
okay, Christine, what's the heavy duty science view on this?
I would say there are companies in other countries in Europe manufacturing stuff for agroecological purposes. I would say have a look outside the UK at what's going on, and look at the possibilities of, what one thing we could do together is to look at the possibilities of bringing new machinery in and trying it as part of participatory projects. There's stuff going on certainly in Scandinavia that gives us that opportunity. Okay, and Will, from your perspective with the Agroecological Development Bank, is this the sort of area where an agroecological development bank approach could invest in that transition around machinery?
Yeah, definitely. It wouldn't all have to be in machinery. And I think that the key thing about the development bank that we're proposing is it needs to be tied with the right advice and the right network and the right sort of system in a localized place, which makes that add up. So hopefully in that sort of circumstance, you're going to end up with, as everyone has said, the opportunity to share resources and pool machinery where possible, but where there needs to be additional investment in infrastructure or perhaps new types of technology or machinery, then that is certainly an opportunity that the development bank will be looking at. The only thing I'd say that I learned again from a Scottish farmer a long time ago, he wrote a Nuffield report on it, is investing in flesh, not metal, was how he described it early on for new entrants, and focusing on stuff which is perhaps additive to your farming enterprise and avoids obviously the depreciation aspects. So that's something that's always stuck with me.
I love the idea of investing in flesh, not metal. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, if you can find the link, that would be really good, because I think I'd like to read that report. I don't know anybody else. Okay, I think because we are now several minutes over, and we do want to get this last Menti done, I'm going to go. Lorna, have you got the slide with the Menti details on that we can put up, or is that Verity?
Verity,
you can get the question.
Load that now.
There we go. Verity's putting that up. Okay. So what do you? The question now is, what comes to mind when you think about agroecology again? And we're going to go. If you go to your Menti page with code 88924853, either on your web browser or on your phone. I'm told it's slightly quicker on the phone. And see whether or not we've got some new words to add to our cloud. Is that the right thing to say? Somebody nod or shake your head.
Yeah. So the 88924853.
Yeah. This is a bit like, phoning in for your favourite person on Strictly Come Dancing or X Factor or whatever. And then we're going to put the evolving word cloud up. And whilst that's going on, I have a question which people might have a short word answer to. It is often said that the long march starts with the first step. And I think we have quite a vigorous march ahead of us. And I wouldn't mind going around the panel and asking them what your first step might be for the long march to agroecology. Jim.
It's a good question, Matt. I think I would focus on the messaging on the communications, and develop a communication plan.
Okay, brilliant. Andrew.
The mindset that I spoke about earlier, Matt, I think we've got to get that round our heads. Really, we've got to get the mindset changed. There is a big problem there, I think.
Okay. Anna, what's your first step?
Definitely agree with Jim here. Communications, making sure that we're actually sharing a consistent a consistent message across, and understanding that there's people that might have not heard it.
Yeah. Okay. Christine?
Better knowledge exchange.
Okay. Will?
Very similar theme, but yeah, join an existing network of existing farmers that are sharing information and knowledge, and find the ones which are close to you or similar in your stage, and start talking to them, because that's where you get the confidence to experiment and try new things.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we've got a new government that's going to be formed in Scotland in a couple of weeks' time, so it'll be very interesting to see how we can get that message over to them. So we've seen the word cloud. It doesn't appear to me, it's gone. I've now got a lovely picture of Will on my screen. Thank you, Will. The word that word cloud didn't evolve much, so I think we still have a very strong biodiversity message coming through. Is that correct? Those of you who got access to it?
Yeah, but we will send it to everyone after this. We will be sending a feedback information, but I think we can see that we really are at the start of a journey, and it's an inclusive journey for everyone. So I'd just like to thank everyone. As we can see here, it involves so many different aspects of research and practice, policy, academia, industry, all of us working together, but foremost for farming for the future of Scotland. We're producing food, but we're also producing lots of other valuable things to the environment and to the economy. So just thank you all. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to Jim, Andrew, Anna, Christine, and Will. To the panel, thank you all. You've done a fantastic job. You've imparted so much information. Also, thank you very much, Lucianne, Verity, and Jane, for all the work that you've done in putting this together. And lastly, to the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, without whom we wouldn't have these events running. So thank you, everyone. And I hope we all see you again at some of the other events that we run. There's one tomorrow on Northern Ireland. So if anybody's interested, please look at the website and join in. We'd love to see you. And this is just, as I said, the start of a journey. And I hope we're all on it. We're on that train together to make things better. Or I should say on that tractor together with a trailer. We're on there to make the best of the future for the environment and for Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Speak again, I hope. Please stay in touch.